just believe in the power of healing and restoration. And I know that if we can just come together and speak about the hard things, we can finally begin to heal. So, this is where we heal.
All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of This Is Where We Heal. Today, I have a very special guest. He is my friend, and you know what? I'm actually going to let him introduce himself today because there's a lot here. But what I do want to say is David has been a very good friend of mine for about 2.5 years, and we have had so many discussions about life and love and happiness and God and finding yourself and healing that I knew he needed to come on to this show today because he has so much wisdom, so much experience, such a good heart, and I know that it will be a blessing to you as much as it has been to me having him in my life. So David, I'm going to let you tell people what you do, and then we're just going to wing it today. Like I started writing notes, I started writing questions, and then I was like, you know what? I've never not had a good conversation with you ever.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
I trust that this will just be what it's meant to be today. So we're going to go with it.
Let's do it. Unscripted. I love it.
Yeah.
So I'm in tropical Florida today. I'm actually at the home of Kelly Siegel, who, as you well know, we've talked about him many times. He owns the Harder Than Life brand. He's an author, and he owns National Technology Management, which is a large technology firm in Detroit, Michigan. But outside of that, I'm just hanging out with him. We're doing some game planning for his brand and whatnot. But I live in Minneapolis. I'm a blue collar kid. I grew up in northeastern Minnesota. Got 2 adult daughters who have my heart, and I own a communications firm called Scott Growth Strategies. So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah. You're also a publisher, right?
Yeah. I publish a blog. It's been in existence for about 12 years. We have a couple 100,000 followers on a regular basis. It's called the Rough Draft Blog. You can check it out at roughdraftblog.com. And then I run SGS's podcast. I'm the host and founder, which is called From Stuck to Successful. And you're going to be a guest on that show soon as well.
Oh yeah. No, that's right. I love that so much. What kind of guests do you like to have on your show?
That's a great question. So most of our guests are business people, men and women, coaches, small business owners, entrepreneurs, anybody who's got a story. You know, we like to hear rags to riches stories or from riches to rags stories too, you know, both ways. So we like to just tell our clients stories. We work with primarily tech firms and SaaS firms around the globe, and they've just got really powerful stories to tell.
Yeah, I love that so much. But you also have a story, which I think we should talk about today, especially when it comes to like the world of love and relationships and evolving
man.
and growing and
We're just
finding yourself.
right in.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna die. That's what you know how I am. I like to just go straight for it. Let's skip all the other stuff and just get straight to the story.
I love it. No issues at all. Well, where do you want to? This is going to be a fun journey. This is going to be a journey for sure. It'll be like an adventure.
Well,
so where do you want? I mean, where do you want to start?
You know what? Let's talk about where you are right now when it comes to relationship, and then I want to talk about like your take on dating culture right now, and then we'll go backward and we'll dive into like how you evolved to this place.
Yeah. So like where I'm at, like dating wise, mindset, like from a mindset perspective.
From a mindset perspective, from a heart perspective, from an experience perspective, maybe the last relationship you were in and what you learned.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Oh man. I'm gonna squirm with this one. Let's see. Well, my heart's in a good place. My heart is healthy and it's whole and it's happy and it's satisfied and fulfilled. You know, I can say that. And for the first time in my life, you know, I just celebrated my 47th birthday on February 16th. So happy birthday to me. But you know, I lived a lot of my life just living in just guilt and shame. You know, I grew up in a homeless household as a kid, and you know, I reconciled with my parents and I have a great relationship with them now. So anything that I say here isn't a shocker or a surprise to them. I have a great relationship with my mom and my dad and my stepmom. My stepdad passed away a couple years ago, but you know, I think I was the oldest of three boys. I have a younger brother and I have a stepbrother in there too. And so, I think is the oldest child syndrome, a lot of those kids take on perfectionism tendencies. They're typically the most responsible one of the group of the pack of kids, whether it's 2 or 10 or 12 or 6 or whatever. And so I carried a lot of burdens that I didn't need to carry, a lot of my life. And so I haven't been able to receive love for a long, long time. And it cost me a lot.
Ooh.
It cost me my first marriage. And I've only been married once and not married anymore. And it's cost me some other good relationships in between, right? Some of which that you and I have talked very candidly about, and you've mentored me and shepherded me through some of those interesting times too. So it's all just been an evolution to where I am today, and I'm whole, I'm happy, I'm healthy, great family, a great circle of friends, good relationships with my daughters and my clients, and I have a really strong faith foundation. I know no matter what, my identity is in Jesus, and I just live my life that way.
What will you talk more about, like, you struggle to receive love? What does that
Yeah,
mean? And what can you give like some examples of that?
yeah,
Because I know
for
a
sure.
lot of people can relate to that. As soon as you said that, I was like, like, I'm such a lover. I can just love all day. I can give all the love
Yeah,
in the world, but I do struggle to believe that I'm worthy of receiving it. It's not even that I don't want to receive it. I struggle to believe
yeah,
I'm worthy of receiving it. So I'd
for
love to hear your
sure.
take on that.
Yeah, so when we say things to ourselves like that, like I think one of the most impactful podcasts or talks that I heard recently was from the lead singer of 10th Avenue North, Mike Donahue, and he was talking about abusive relationships. And he said, if we were in if we were in a relationship with ourselves and we told ourselves the things that we think about ourselves on the inside, we would be in the most horrible, worst toxic abusive relationships ever.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people struggle with that, right? Doesn't matter your age. You could be 17, you could be 47, you could be 77, right? Doesn't matter if you're a boomer, Gen Xer, Gen Z, millennial, whatever.
Yeah.
Trauma and negative self-talk there's no generation that has a corner on the market, right?
Yeah.
And so when we live this life of feeling like we're less than, or like we don't deserve love, or that we haven't earned it, or like we don't deserve to be happy and content and fulfilled, like we have to unpack where that's coming from. Like, why don't I feel that way? Right.
Yeah.
And I have a cognitive coach. His name is Troy White. He lives in tropical Fargo, North Dakota. And Troy's been by my side for like 5+ years. He's one of my best friends. And through his coaching practice, what I've learned about myself, what I've uncovered is we learn the most about how we make decisions and interact with people romantically, in our family, friends, our neighbors, whoever, whatever the context of the relationship is, in a certain age gap. So it's like 1 to 6, 1 to 7, 1 to 8, 1 to 9 years old. Like those are really
Wow.
formative years, right? And as kids, if we grew up in a home where there's, like, if you're a girl and you have a dad who's really distant, or maybe he's a workaholic, or maybe he's
Mm.
just very brash and he's not very emotionally available, or maybe you didn't have a dad at all, God forbid. You're as a woman, as you grow older, doesn't matter if you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, you're going to struggle with abandonment issues. You're going to struggle with insecurities of not feeling like you'll ever be enough. You're going to struggle to accept it when people give you compliments. If they tell you, hey, you have a good heart, you're a good mom, you're a good sister, you're a good daughter, you're beautiful, you're lovable, you're not unlovable. Like, you're really going to struggle to receive those things because of the context of that relationship. And so I've often
Mm.
said for years, parents can do incredibly beautiful things in raising children, and they can also do a lot of damage, right? And everybody deserves to be loved, but not everybody deserves to eat at your table. And so I think as we grow older through those circumstances and we realize, hey, I don't feel this way. Well, why don't you feel that way? Like, let's unpack that, right? And figure it out. And so for me, I had strained parental relationships. I had massive parental wounds that I didn't deal with up until, just the last few years. And it cost me a lot in the process. And so I feel like when we can't receive love, there is a barrier. There's a blockage there somewhere. There's a blockage in that vibration that God designed us to live inside of. There's a barrier emotionally or mentally, and we have to figure that out. For everybody, it's a little bit different. For me, it happened to come from some parental wounds and some hurts and wounds from my past and some abuse. And it's just a matter of identifying them and working through them. And when you do, oh gosh, just life can just blossom so much, and life can get so good. Like the question I ask myself nowadays isn't, God, I wish I had this, I wish I could go here, wish I could do there. It's, how good can I handle it, right? Like, how good can I handle life right now? And it just keeps getting better. But most people aren't willing to do that inner work because it's really, 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 really hard. And there's
Yeah.
a lot of loneliness and isolation, and there can be things like depression and anxiety. And to be candid, you know, I can't speak for other men, but I didn't, I didn't like myself very much. I hated myself. And so when you feel that way about yourself, how you feel on the inside is what comes out on the outside. Output equals input, input equals output. It's the same difference. And so
True.
you might not like a lot of the things that you find when you do a lot of introspection, but once you do, again, your life just blossoms like a caterpillar, like a flower. But if we don't, there's consequences to it long term.
Yeah, I agree. How did you start that process? Like, was it just sitting with those thoughts and like acknowledging that they were there?
Pain, a lot. Pain is a great motivator.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not the best motivator, but it's. I mean, I found it's the best motivator. Yeah, I went through divorce about 5 years ago. It almost killed me, like
Oh,
literally killed me. Yeah, like it was not good. And it wasn't the other person's fault. I was a bad husband for many, many years, and there was a lot of stuff that I got wrong in that relationship, and that that was the catalyst where I was like, man, something is broke. I'm broke inside, and we need to fix it. It's like, I think in season 2 or 3 of Ted Lasso. I'm not sure if you've watched that TV series on Apple. It's great,
I love
but
it.
yeah, I think, and they lose a series of games, like a string of games that they shouldn't have lost. Like they should have easily won, and they're defeated and pissed off and angry, and they go in the locker room after this game, and Ted Lasso, the coach, walks in, played by Jason Sudeikis, walks in the locker room and he says, "Gentlemen, we are broken. We are broke, and we are broken. And I want you all to think about that. I want you to go home tonight, get a good night's rest. No booze, no clubs, no women, no bad food, no tacos, like none of that. Like go home, eat clean, get a good night's rest, no bad behaviors. Come back tomorrow. We got a lot of work to do. It's going to be really hard, but we're going to do it together, and we're going to win." And he walked into his office, slapped the believe sign above his door, and that was it. And then they set sail on this adventure together as a team to figure out why they were broken. And so I had the same situation. I had a series of unfortunate events. And I was like, there's something wrong inside, and I got to figure out what it is. And so I've just been on this journey of self discovery. And that's kind of what got me where I am today.
Yeah. I mean, I relate to every bit of that same. I mean, obviously my divorce was 2.5, 3 years ago, but it was
Yeah.
the same thing for me. It was just looking at my life and realizing that not only do I not know who I am, but I certainly don't like who I am.
Yeah.
And I realized I'm not going to find a healthy relationship until the relationship I have with myself is healthy.
That's
And
exactly.
it's so hard. It was so hard sitting in that and acknowledging the ways that I had beat myself up and shamed myself and guilted myself. And I'm going to be so honest with you, I'm still fighting it today. And that's been
Totally.
2.5 years ago when I had that moment of realization. I
Yeah.
still fight it today. I still have to, every single time that thought comes into my mind, remind myself that it's not true. That it's not true. That, like, when I'm feeling like, oh, I'm not worthy, I'm not likable, I'm not lovable, none of those things are true. None
No.
of those things are truths at all. Um, but I still have to remind myself that, because I think that when you've spent an entire lifetime, and it's like you said, these types of things start when you're a child. When you've spent an entire lifetime embracing every negative thought and not fighting it, they are so stored up here and here that it
Yeah.
takes a really, really long time to get rid of them. And maybe
Yes.
they don't ever go away. I don't know.
You know, what I know about science is, and I'm a huge fan of John Delaney and Dr. Andrew Huberman, guys like that who study the human psyche and the human brain. They're so smart, these guys are. And it really is about it's about understanding your brain and understanding how it works, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like I always say that our brains try to treat us like moms. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So if you were to raise a house of boys, boys are nuts. Like from the time they're walking to the time they're 13, you have to wonder if they even have brains because they're illogical. You walk
Are you sure
around
it's
with
13 and not, 53? I'm kidding.
yeah, exactly. Well, little boys walk around with hardly any clothes on because their body temperatures are way up here, and there's massive amounts of testosterone flooding their brains, and they're risk averse. Like they're afraid. They're not afraid of jumping off the kitchen counter onto the back of the couch. Like they catapult themselves, and they're just boys. Boys are supposed to be like that.
Yeah.
And as a dad, you're encouraging that. I mean, you're not like saying, "Hey, yeah, do something really stupid and and hurt yourself." No, they're not saying that. But men are by and large just more risk takers than women are. That's just the female male brain dynamic. And so, as moms, what's your first instinct when you see little Timmy doing something scary? You're like, "Don't do that, buddy. You're going to
Yeah.
get hurt." Their job is to be nurturing and protectionary. And so the human brain is wired the exact same way. It's designed to keep us stuck. It's designed to keep us in depression, in pain, in anxiety, because if that's all we've ever known, it is scary to do something different than that, right? It's like when you jump out of an airplane. Like I've jumped out of an airplane dozens of times. And the first time I did it, I remember the scary part is not going up. The scary part is actually not going down. The scary part, when you do it for the first couple times, is you're in this piece of little crap plane, and it's all hollowed out. There's no seats. You sit on your butt in kind of a tuck mode, and then if you do it for the first time or two, you go tandem, which means you buckle yourself with an instructor, and then they open the door up. And when they open that door up, and you're 10, 11,000 feet, 12,000 feet above the earth without a parachute on, as you're getting strapped into an instructor, that's the scariest part, right?
Yeah.
And your brain is telling you, "Oh my God, what the heck are you doing?" Super bad. And then you have a trauma response, and you start shaking, and you start stuttering or stammering or whatever your reaction is, your physical reaction, and your body's like freaking out because it's scared. Like that's the body's normal way. It's a fight or flight syndrome, right?
Yeah.
So our brains function in the same way with anything that's scary like that. Like our brain doesn't know the difference for me having a tough relationship conversation with you in fight or flight mode versus jumping out of an airplane versus beating the shit out of a bad guy in a dark alley on a Friday. Like it doesn't. It just sees fight, flight, or freeze. That's it. That's all your brain.
Wow.
It can't distinguish between the type or the context. Like that's where amygdala comes in and where the prefrontal cortex works, right?
Yeah.
So my point is, your brain is always going to try to keep you stuck. So anytime that we want to make massive change in our lives, that's why it's so hard, because you have to develop new neural pathways, and we have to develop new ways of thinking. And that way of thinking is really, really hard. As you equate it to like relationally, like say you're a person who has had a series of really bad relationships. Like you've had 3, 4, 5, 6 bad relationships, and they just haven't gone well. They just haven't gone well. And you're a lively young man or you're a lively young woman, and you're dating and trying to find this person, and whether you've been married before or divorced or whatever, doesn't matter. You're just trying to find your person, right? And everybody deserves the right to find their person, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, you have to ask the tough question: is the reason I'm not finding this person them, or is it me?
Mm-hmm.
Do I like the person that I talk to in the mirror every day and that I look at in the mirror? And if you don't, then you have to ask yourself, okay, what do I need to change in my life to transform this so that I don't keep pursuing the same thing over and over again and going back to this X, or going back to this type of X person, or going back to this type of behavior, this relationship. Like if you attract toxicity, you're toxic. And I've always said, Danny Morell talks about this in a lot of his podcasts and his stuff on Instagram and TikTok. Is he often says, a man or a woman who goes back to a toxic relationship is just as toxic as the person that they go back to. They are. And
Ooh.
maybe not to the degree, but again, it also goes back to, what I talked about earlier. If we're broke inside, we're going to attract broken, right? And so going back to your original question, around how we break through some of that and what that looks like, it's really about developing new neural pathways. And those old neural pathways, those old behaviors and old habits, they never go away. It's just we develop new ones and we develop new synapses that grow on top of them in our brain. And if you want to watch a cool video, just go to Google or YouTube or TikTok and Google new neural pathway being built, and it'll actually show you under a microscope what it looks like. It's a super cool thing. Looks like a
Yeah.
couple worms like devouring each other and building new ones on top of each other, and that's really what it is. And so we have to develop those new neural ways, those new neural pathways, and those new ways of thinking. Because if we don't, we'll always stay stuck.
Oh, that's so true. What do you think has been the most profound change in your life in comparison to the way that you dated before versus now?
Yeah. I mean, gosh, that's a big question.
I
Uh,
know. I know.
yeah, you ask good questions, by the way.
Thank you.
Um, I would say, like before, I always thought I had a type. I think that's so. I think that's inherently true. I think your type is your person. Your type is where you put your energy and your effort and where you water it. It's like the old cliche, the grass is greenest where you water it, right? And I think
Hmm.
that's true for anything. Like if you're a expert rock climber or you're an expert NASCAR driver or you're an expert coder or developer, or maybe you know how to put bouquets together at a flower shop and you're a great designer, interior designer, whatever. Like whatever you're really great at, whether it's a vocation or a function or whatever, like you're good where you invest your time and your energy, where you practice and put a lot of effort, enthusiasm. And so I think that's true for relationships, true too. I used to go looking for it. Now I don't go look for it. And I was in a really short relationship that ended about a month ago, and there was nothing wrong with the relationship. I feel like though, since then, even going forward, like dating is not even top of mind for me. My focus is my girls. I have a new grandkid. My youngest daughter had a baby about a month ago, and so I'm going to go down and start spending some time with them and hang out with them, and just hanging out with my friends like Kelly Siegel, people in my network and my sphere. But I feel like maybe this sounds cliche. I don't know, but I believe that God will bring somebody into my life when I least expect it. And I know that I know that God doesn't want me to be single and want me to be by myself forever. I know
Right.
He didn't
Right.
design us for that purpose. He designed us to be in community with one another. We're
Hmm.
biologically and biochemically engineered to do life together, not apart. And
Yeah.
so I believe that to my core. And so I think that when I'm probably not looking for it, there it'll be. So I think that's one thing. Like I don't chase like maybe I once did. I used to look for external validation, right? And
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm sure a
when
lot
I
of
got
people can relate to that.
yeah, exactly. So I think it's a matter of like what's driving you on the inside. Like, are you dating just to date? Are you dating because you're lonely, which is a horrible reason to be in a relationship? That means you're trying to put a salve on a wound, and you're trying to
Mm,
sort of external validation, which is bad because all your validation comes inside. Like we have everything that we need to be the best versions of ourselves. We do. We just have to figure out what that is and get there.
how do
So
you even get out of a state of so I know a lot of people that have reached out to me over the past couple of years
yeah,
that have been actively healing and doing the work have stated like, I'm doing the work. I'm, living my life, but I'm still really lonely. I still really want someone. And I have like I'm kind of split between two different ways of thinking with it where there's a part of me that goes, well, that's normal. Like
yeah,
everyone longs for connection and intimacy. Like that's human. But then there's
totally.
also the part of me that's like, well, but if you're truly fulfilled with yourself, you're content and okay on your own. And honestly, sometimes I go between the two, and sometimes I don't know which one I believe. And sometimes I believe both, and sometimes I struggle with that myself, where I'm like, I'm lonely in certain seasons and I'm going, okay, is there something wrong with me? Am I not content with myself? Because I think I am. And then I'll start feeling really lonely all of a sudden. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, is there something wrong with me? Does this mean I'm not fulfilling my purpose?
Yeah. Loneliness is hard. It is. It's really hard. And, I think that if there's inner work to be done, it can feel even harder because then it can feel like, well, I'm never going to get through this season, or I'm never
Yeah.
going to be my person, or I'm always going to be lonely, or I'm going to be the lonely lady with a bunch of cats, fuck my life, or I'm going to be the dude who lives in the mountains and grows a beard and has horrible hygiene, right? That's like my lot in life. But that's self-defeating mindset. That's self-defeating negative self-talk. Again, going back to what we talked about earlier, you got to figure that piece out first in order to get to the next piece. And so growth is very much an evolution, right? Like a butterfly doesn't become a butterfly at the snap of a finger. It becomes a
Yeah.
butterfly by becoming an ugly worm or a caterpillar first. And then it gets
Yeah.
into a cocoon and it goes through the ugly process of whatever that metamorphosis is, and then it poof, comes out as a butterfly. So it's very much a process. It's like making steel. Like steel is sold on the open market in 10-ton, 11-ton, 12-ton sheets, and they're like 30 by 30 sheets. But making steel is ugly and hard and dangerous. Like
Mm.
it's one of the hardest professions in the world to do if you're a steel miner. And so the process of getting to that point where we can attract that person and get through loneliness and feeling alone is really difficult. I remember shortly after I got divorced, I just really struggled with going out and doing things by myself. And I was married for a long time. I got married young. I was married for 21 years. And the last time I dated was during the Clinton administration. Like it was a long time. And so I was like, I'm going to feel foolish. Well, why am I going to feel foolish? Well, because I'm worried about what other people will think. Who fucking cares what other people think?
Right, right.
I mean, I cared about it then. I don't now because I was unhealthy and healed then, and I'm not that way anymore. Now I do all kinds of things by myself, right? Like I've traveled abroad. I've gone to all 50 states. I'm a big skier, so I ski all the time in Vail, Jackson Hole, Keystone, Big Sky, Lake Tahoe, all over the country. And by and large, with the exception of one trip that I took somebody on, it's just been me, myself, and I, right? So when we're scared of maybe doing things by ourselves, I would just encourage your audience, go do it. Like if there's something you're really freaking scared about, go do that thing. Like if
Yeah.
you're really scared, go jump out of an airplane, go jump out of an airplane. If you're scared to go to the
Done.
movies by yourself, go to the movies by yourself. It's not that hard. You can do hard things. I guarantee it. We can all do hard things. But sitting in
Yeah.
that loneliness, yeah, that's a hard one. I can't say that I have the magic formula or magic recipe, but what I will say is that um, I think it's okay to sit in a season of loneliness, right? Like if you read through the Old Testament, I love the story of Moses and when God takes him up on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. Now, we know medically and biologically, like the human body can't survive probably past 7 or 10 days without a combination of food and water. It can last
Right.
longer on water, less on food, right?
Yeah.
So when Moses came down from the mountain, I think it's in Exodus. I think it's like in Exodus 3 or 4. He came down off the mountain and he had the tablets and he'd spent 40 days and 40 nights with God. And the scriptures say that everybody that saw him said he radiated.
Yeah.
Radiated is a synonym for glowed, for excitement, enthusiasm. Like it came out of his pores, it came through his skin. And they said he still looked like Moses, but he looked like a different person, like a new person.
Wow.
And so I think, and not to get religious or super biblical, but I think that our biggest growth periods come from periods where we spend time by ourselves. Because we got to get okay with loving ourselves. We got to get okay with being by ourselves. We got to be okay and get okay with doing things by ourselves, making a financial decision like buying a car or house or doing your taxes or little things like that, right? And it's okay to be independent, learn to do things on your own. And I think that's oftentimes where some of the best growth happens too.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. I definitely um I feel really comfortable doing things by myself and going places and getting food on my own. I do it all the time. Like it's just literally just my life, honestly. And I've gotten to a very comfortable place with that where I've accepted. I don't even want to say accepted it because that almost sounds like I gave up, but like I just mean that like I'm good with it. Like if I'm, wanting to go to dinner and I text a friend and they can't come, I'm happy to go by myself. Like I still enjoy it. Um,
Yes.
and so maybe there's a difference in loneliness and longing because that doesn't mean I don't still love to have the company there with me. That doesn't mean that I don't still want to be able to sit there and look at someone and eat with them and communicate and connect with them. And I
Yeah.
do long for that. I do long for that person in my life, but I don't necessarily feel lonely either. So maybe there is a difference between the two.
Totally. And I would say, and just to take that a step further, like you should want to have somebody in your life for the right reasons,
Oh,
right?
that's good.
Just to say, God, I want somebody in my life because I hurt so bad or because I'm so lonely. Well, okay, let's unpack that first. Why are you hurting? Well, because Tammy or Tommy broke up with me. Okay, well, why'd they break up with you? Because they're a raging maniac, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, you own your part too. Let's dissect that. Let's not talk about how bad
Yeah.
of a person, how big of a demon they are. Let's talk about your part.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, here's what I didn't do right. Here's what I didn't do wrong. Okay, why? Let's unpack this. Go really, really deep. And it's that process, that evolution we talked about earlier, that will really help us identify, what's broken inside. But there's a really fancy restaurant in downtown Fargo. It's called Mezzaluna. And like growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. We grew up like, I would say, lower middle class, right? My mom was a nurse. My stepdad was a deputy sheriff. He was in law enforcement. And so they didn't make a lot of money, right? Like making a combined family income of 60 or 70 or 80K a year combined was like a ton of money, right? And so $50 to me, a $50 bill is a lot of money still today. And I always said that if I had the opportunity, I would work my ass off so that I could go and spend whatever I want to, wherever I want, on whatever I want. And there's been certain seasons where I choose to live poor because I just think being frugal and being wise is a good thing to do. And there are certain seasons where I'm like, if I want to go blow a bunch of cash and spend $10,000 on a birthday weekend, I can do that, right?
Yeah.
So I got used to going to this restaurant, and it's an awesome restaurant. And I would almost always go there by myself. I only took 2 dates there. And I'll bet over the course of 8 years, as I lived in Fargo before moved back to Minneapolis this last summer, um, thousands and thousands of nights there and a
Wow.
lot of money. And I know the owners, and we're super good friends. And I almost always went by myself, sat at a table by myself, booth by myself, at the belly up at the bar by myself, and I always ate something healthy like, chicken or potatoes or asparagus or whatever, and have my drink of choice. Like I'm a recovered alcoholic, so I don't drink alcohol, but might be soda water or club soda or just water or whatever juice. And it was awesome. But I remember when I first started doing it, I felt so self-conscious, right? I'm like, I am just a big freaking loser. Oh my goodness. I am a good-looking, successful, like there's nothing wrong with me, inherently wrong with me. Why am I doing this by myself? Right? Why do I
Yeah.
feel this way? Why do I feel so foolish being here by myself? And then I figured out it was an insecurity of mine that I had to unpack, and it was based on a
Yeah.
childhood hurt. And so when we identify those things and work through them, the loneliness kind of goes away. But there's still plenty of nights. Like there's some nights, like a few weeks ago, I just cried myself to sleep a couple nights in a row. So I'm like, this fucking sucks. I'm about to turn 47 years old. I should have my best friend and life partner sleeping next to me, waking up next to me, doing fun stuff or hard stuff, whatever, mundane stuff, grocery shopping stuff. But there isn't. Like, what the heck, right? And so I think it's
I
okay.
yeah,
It's okay.
I think a lot of people, especially that are in like the healing season, can relate to that for sure. Like where
Yeah.
you sometimes are just like, I'm okay with this, but it's not what I want still.
Yeah.
Like I'm still mad about it sometimes.
Yes.
I have like a couple of friends that are like freezing their eggs because they're 40 years old and that hasn't happened for them yet, and they're having to constantly fight the idea that they're not going to spend the rest of their life alone, and they're okay, they're happy, they're content, and they'll do what they have to do, with their life. If they want to have children, they'll freeze their eggs and they'll figure it out, but it's not what they want. It's still not what
Yeah.
they want,
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. And I'll say too, I just speak to the guys that are watching this. Like a lot of the guys in my circle are, pretty healthy men. They're not perfect, but they're healthy. And, I once surrounded myself with really um, what I would call perverted, toxic, faith-based guys, right? Like guys who were just Westboro Baptist kind of people,
Mm-hmm.
not that bad, but you know what I mean, right? Like very
Yeah, I do.
fundamentalistic beliefs. Like women should do this one thing and not have ambition or purpose, and men should do this one thing and do everything and shoot and hunt and kill and grr, that's not how it is. And I think that's just messed up. And a lot of guys mess up women. They do.
Yeah.
There are a lot of guys, whether they're 77, 67, 57, 47, 27, 17, whatever. Like a lot of guys are just really fucked up and they have
Yeah.
a lot of anger issues and they've chosen not to go to coaching or therapy. They're uncoachable. They have egos a mile wide and a mile deep. And,
Mhm.
I believe in clearly defined gender roles. I do. And if that means people hate me for it, I could care less. I believe that there are things that women do beautifully that men can never do. I believe
Yeah.
that there are things that men can do that women can't do. And I also believe that God designed us and the universe designed us to live in a certain um, ebb and a flow, right? A yin and a yang. Like we should complement each other. And so when guys have massive anger issues and they choose not to address them, I just think that's not okay. And when guys are really immature and they're baking reefer at 30, 40, 50, 60 years old and smoking weed and playing video games, like if you're a dude watching this right now, fucking grow up because you're going to hurt daughters. You're going to hurt your mom. You're going to hurt that future woman in your life. It's not okay. Like a lot of guys just need a good, kick in the ass, right? Because they're
Yeah.
so immature and they also don't know how to get beyond that. A lot of guys don't have the right tools. And so that happens. You have beautiful friends like yours who are in their 30s and 40s or whatever, and they're freezing their eggs or whatever when it shouldn't be that way. And
Right.
love shouldn't be as hard as we make it to be, right? I think a lot of times it's a lot harder than we make it a lot harder than it needs to be, which is so sad and unfortunate. But that just goes back to what we talked about earlier. Overthinking stems from negative self-talk and how we talk to ourselves and the abusive nature in our minds toward ourselves and all that.
It feels like so many men want love and connection, but they're absolutely terrified of commitment and loyalty. And I can't understand that. And so sometimes I think to myself, well, maybe it's not that they're afraid of commitment. Maybe it's not that they're afraid of connection and intimacy. Maybe they're just not the right person.
Yeah.
But then you kind of go, I mean, I always like, I go back and forth between, oh, it's just not the right person versus, no, actually, this man is terrified of connection, real, true, intimate connection, not just, physical. Right. And they're like repelled by any sort of need or desire or want or request that a woman has that is very basic,
Yes.
very reasonable to even ask for. But it's like the second a woman starts expressing like, hey, I really want this from you. It's like men are just like, oh, never mind. I'm out. I gotta go. And I don't understand that. I can't wrap my head around it. It's like, why even tip your toe in the water? Why even do the whole song and dance with a woman if you're not ready to have something with her that's actually real?
Yes. I love that. It's exactly it. So I was grabbing my phone. I'm looking at something here. You said something that I want to me a few weeks ago that was hard for me to hear, but you were so
Ooh.
right. Yes. It was, what you told me was profound. It was life changing the morning I read it. And you said, David, since we're friends and since we're honest, I'm gonna be truthful with you. You said there have been women in your life that you've ended things with that I think would have made amazing partners with some love, grace, and reassurance on your part. And I remember reading that and going, and I didn't get offended by it because I don't have an ego. I don't get offended by those things like I once did. But I was like, I'm really going to think about this. Like, what did Ashley mean? And you're so spot on. And I have been terrified to go through love and it's not commitment that men fear. It's not being loyal. It's not changing, maybe their fuckboy ways or bad habits or bad behaviors. It's not changing that. Like, guys will change for a good woman. They'll change for a good situation like that. And when you see a dude change and you see a light bulb moment, oh, it's the most beautiful thing in the world. Like my stepmom and my dad are singers, and they sing in community choirs and church choirs. And my stepmom often says, "There's no beautiful harmony in the world than a bunch of like grown men singing in harmony melody in some sort of sonnet or musical
Yeah.
situation." There's not. It's a beautiful sound, right? It's a magnificent sound, and it like makes you well up, it makes you emotional. That's the way God designed it to be, right? Same situation. Like when you see a man in a really hard situation step up and do the right thing, either for him or for his family, oh my God, like you just want to follow that person. Like maybe
Yeah.
it's a father or grandfather or so, a hero in a story, the antagonist in a story, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of guys, like, they don't fear that. What they fear crashing, right? Like my dad he once told me, he's like, people don't have a fear of flying. And I asked him one time, because he hates to fly. I never understood that. Like, baby boomers just don't like to fly. I don't know why. It's maybe like inherent to their generation or whatever. But it drives me nuts because I like to fly, because I like to
Hmm.
get there as quick as possible to enjoy the journey and the destination, right? I mean, I love a good road trip, but you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
I was just pressing him one time, and he's like, "It's not. I don't have a fear of flying. It's not being rushed going through security. It's not being anal probed by the TSA. What it is I fear crashing. I fear all the moments that I'm going to miss out on if this plane crashes. I'm going to miss
Oof.
moments with you, with your brother, with my grandkids and my great grandkids, and that's what I fear. I fear the hurt and the pain and the missing out." And I was like, "Oh man, that was profound, right?"
That is profound.
It is. And so I don't think that men have a struggle with commitment. I think it's, first of all, it's not like a one answer fixes all. It's not like it's not a
Right.
second question
Right.
to answer. I think I think pornography has a big thing to do with it. I think dating apps have a big thing to do with it. I think finding unhealthy partners who allow them to do things that they shouldn't be doing for short bursts of pleasure. I think that's part of it. I think a lot of boys didn't grow up in homes where they had a really strong, healthy, gentle, tender warrior as a father, right, or grandfather. Um, I think it's instant gratitude of our country. America's a really sick country. It just is a very
Yeah.
sick place, both emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, right?
Yeah.
And so I think by and large, to go back to your original point, I think a lot of guys just struggle with, they don't necessarily struggle with commitment. They just don't want to get their hearts hurt.
Yeah. But you know what's so sad about that is that if a man is with a good woman, she's going to have the grace for that. She's going to
Yeah,
have the grace for the moments that you're crashing. She's going to have the grace for the moments that the
that's it.
the plane is going down, right? And that's character is so important. But I think a lot of guys look for the superficial, the quick, the easy, the fun, the you know what I
Mhm.
mean,
Yeah,
versus the and I'm not saying there's so many every woman in my life has it all,
yeah,
the single and the married, they are the whole package. Like, and it always baffles me when I look at my friends that are single because they're stunningly beautiful, they're
yeah.
kind, they have integrity,
Mhm.
they do good things in the world, they put out good energy into the world, they're fun, they're funny, they're sweet, they have it all. And I'm just like, how is it that so many men have passed up on something so beautiful? Because they're the kind of woman that sits with someone in the trenches. They're the kind of woman that says, "I believe in you even if no one else does." They are the kind of women that will be at your hospital bedside when you're sick. And so it's like that's where I get so discouraged and confused because I'm looking at all these women that are just phenomenal, and so many men have passed it up. And I'm going, what is wrong? What is wrong? Like, what is the problem here? What are you looking for if this isn't it?
Yeah, I know. It's so hard. And I would say, just taking a step further, like to find a guy who loves his mom and loves his dad and loves his kids and loves Jesus or God or has a purpose, like that's even harder to find, right? Like I feel um, like most of my friends are male friends. Like I don't have a lot of female friends just because I have some strong feelings about that. But with the exception of present company excluded.
I was like, what?
Yeah, but I feel like what is the topic of conversation and what we talk about are why are guys like that? And I would say the onus is definitely on guys. Like if they're not mature enough, or if they're not emotionally available enough, or they're not ready enough to be in a relationship, to your point earlier, then don't date. Don't date.
That's how I feel too.
Yeah, if you're a man or a woman who's got massive trauma from his or her past, don't waste my time to try to date me, because
Right.
I will see those red flags as clear as day, and I will break right through them, and I will decide, hey, you're a great person, I love and care about you, but this relationship just is not for me. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's okay, because my self-worth and your self-worth and a person's self-worth is more important than anything in the world. As soon as we start to sacrifice that, we're not living in the God-breathed, universe-breathed authenticity that we were designed to be, right? And
Yeah.
as soon as we start lying to ourselves or placating or people-pleasing, we're not living that way. And so if you're not ready for that, then don't date.
Yeah.
I would also say, like, there's some ownership women need to take in that too. Like if you're allowing a dude to come into your life and just treat you um, like a friend with benefits, then you're allowing it, and you shouldn't be allowing it. If you're allowing a dude to come into your life, or somebody to come into your life who just wants you for sexual relations, or just wants you as a buddy to hang out with whenever they want, well, you're allowing it. Now, I'm not going to judge anybody. Like if that's your situation, great. And I had seasons like that? Sure. Am I proud of it? No, absolutely not, because it was meeting a very short-term band-aid approach that was just not healthy for anybody. But if that's your situation, more power to you. If you can live with that for the rest of your life and be happy and satisfied and content, go for it. Knock your socks off. But for most people, most really healthy people I know, that's not the kind of situation they want to be in. They want to be in a loving, loyal, committed, content, fulfilled, harder than life, softer than life, happier than life relationship, right?
Yeah.
And it's just them two taking on the world in each other's corner no matter
How can a woman know if a man is ready for that?
what.
Because
Yeah.
when you're dating, it's like you can't really know that immediately. Like, are there things that a woman can look for that give her that assurance of, hey, this is probably somebody who's ready for this?
Yes. So Dr. Phil did this podcast. He does a podcast called Fill in the Blanks, and it's amazing. It's amazing. And he did a podcast like I want to say 2 summers ago, and it was like a 6 or 7 part series. Super good friend of mine sent it to me, and in the whole series of podcasts, he was just talking about relationships for people who are single and people who've been divorced and they're now single because of that, right? Or widowed or whatever. And he talked a ton about core value alignment, and he talked a ton about actions aligning with words.
Mm.
So if a woman, um, like a lot of guys just don't know how to lead, and I'm not perfect either, but I have a great dad, and my stepdad was pretty um, pretty chivalrous, and my grandfather was very chivalrous and very gentlemanly, right? Like old school Frank Sinatra kind of chivalry, right? So I had good mentors, and I just learned these things because I studied and I paid attention, and you pay attention to little details, right? But not all guys are like that. Very few guys are like that. But for the guys that are, actions should align with words. They should be planning the date. And if they don't know how to plan it, or maybe they're terrible planners, they'll be trying to get your input as a woman, right? And if they say they're going to be there at 7 p.m., they'll be there at 7 p.m. And if they're running late because of life circumstances or traffic, or maybe the cat or the dog had an accident, like this life stuff comes up, right? Or their kiddo got sick and they can't make the date, or they have to break the date, or they have to be half an hour late, they will call you and they'll tell you. So actions will align with words. If they said something really stupid, they will apologize for it. And they will do it in such a way that it clearly communicates how sad and remorseful that they were, and then it's not going to happen again. And if it does, they'll own it. And if it's a perpetual problem, they'll uncover the reason why it's a perpetual problem If it's a every once in a while problem because I get cranky and don't have my coffee or I'm hangry or whatever and I snap at you, well, that's just life. Everybody does that, right? Doesn't make it okay, but it's just normal. So actions will align with words, right? And if a woman really wants to know if a guy's ready, that's the first thing I pay attention to. Is what he's saying going to align with what he's doing? And if there's a miss, even a little miss, run, end it.
Really?
Run. Doesn't matter if
Like
there's
how little are we talking?
like if he wants to move too fast and wants to have sex, if he wants to if you ask him about what sort of capacity he has for a relationship, if he doesn't have an answer, that would be a red flag. If you say, hey, what are some passion projects you're working on, or what's your purpose in life, or what are you doing with your future? And he's like, weed and booze and video games. Okay, you're the kind of guy I can have a lot of fun with on a Friday night. Not healthy fun, but that's about it, right? Like you're not the kind of guy who's going to meet my grandma, my mother, certainly not my kids, probably not my dog or my cat, right? And those are the kinds of things to look out for, like behavioral, what I'll call behavior. I hate the term red flags, but we'll just call them behavioral red flags. Like if their actions and their words don't align.
Yeah, I totally hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
What'd you say?
I was going to say, then you have to really know you have to identify what your core values are. Like there are things in my life that I will just not tolerate. There are a lot of things that are gray because I'm not a black and white guy. I'm just not. I know there's a lot of gray for most things. Like there are some things that are just right and wrong. I get that. But for me, I tend to approach things with there's a lot of gray in the middle, and it's okay to talk through everything and talk through a lot of things. So that being said, like if you're a woman looking to date a guy who, you want to spend the rest of your life with, make sure that that's a core value of yours. Like, why are you dating? Why are you dating? Why are you on dating apps? Are you dating to find somebody who you can have fun with or somebody who you can build a life with? Esther Perel is one of my heroes, and she is amazing. And she is like, she gives TED Talks about relationships all the time, all over the world. And she talks about, do you want to build a love with somebody or build a life with somebody? And she did this really great podcast a few months ago on Lewis Howes' podcast. And she kind of broke that down. And, she talked about hurts and wounds and infidelity and how to apologize and all these things that can really cause a lot of mess and chaos in marriage relationships. And she even wrote a book about infidelity, right? And how couples who work through that 80% of the time have lower divorce rates than people who don't have any major struggles at all, right?
Wow.
And so I think there's something to be said for grit and stick-to-itiveness and commitment. You know what I mean? And so make sure you know your core values as a woman. Like, why are you dating? Are you dating to find somebody you can build life with, or just build love with? Because there's a big difference.
Yeah, I agree with that. Do you have any final thoughts that you think are important for men and women in the dating field right now that are open to love, looking for love, but maybe aren't sure they'll find it?
Yeah, I would say go easy on yourself. That's been my saying for like the last, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. Like, give yourself grace. I think we are way too hard on ourselves, and we overthink things, and we make mistakes, and then we beat the shit out of ourselves for weeks and weeks and months, and it's just we become our own self-defeating prophecy, right? And that's just so horrible because it doesn't have to be that way. Like, if you're beautiful and you know it, say it and own it and go live like it, right?
Yeah,
and even if you're not, like, it's okay. Like, act like it. Like, act as if. So there's a set of aphorisms that I tend to live by, and I'll send these to you. You can put them in the show notes if you want.
Okay.
But if you're dating and you're looking for that future person, again, identify what your core values are. Go easy on yourself. It's okay to go on dates. It's not okay to be a serial dater. It's okay to get to know people, but you got to get out there, right? You got to go to community groups or church or with your friends or get set up on blind dates or do dating apps or whatever the case might be. But I'd also say you can live without somebody, probably better. You can live without them. Like if you've just been through a breakup, you can live without them, probably better, right? The other thing I'll say is love is not enough to make a good relationship. It's just not.
Yeah.
It takes
Yeah.
shared connection, chemistry, spiritual chemistry, sexual chemistry, mental chemistry, intelligence chemistry. I would say that it's not about um, it's not about staying out of guilt and shame. Right? So if you're in a relationship, maybe right now, and you hear this and you're like, well, I could never leave this person. If I leave them, I'll have nothing, or all my life will fall apart. I mean, some of that might be true, but guess what? You're batting 1,000. Like in baseball terms, you're batting 1,000. So you'll get through the hardest days. You can leave this bum or you can leave this jabroni and you'll be just fine, right? You will. And so I just encourage your guests to just to kind of live by some of those. And there's a whole lot more of them, those aphorisms, right? Like you should get to the point in your life and your relationship where you don't need somebody, but you want somebody. Like I
Yeah.
don't need a woman in my life. Like I live by myself, no cat, no dog. I have the freedom to go wherever I want. I can do whatever I want. I have a great life. It's not easy. Like I am a small business owner. I own a small consulting firm. It's very hard some days and some weeks. And there's some weeks I hate it, and some weeks, and most weeks I absolutely love what I do. But I don't need a partner. I don't need a woman in my life. I want
Yeah.
one, but I don't need one, right? And
Same.
when you get to
Same.
that point where you can go, huh, I mean, is this a little lonely at times? Sure. Does it suck? Yeah. Am I going to have a good cry? Mm-hmm. Am I going to go through a season of loneliness that's not very much fun? Yep. Am I going to go through a season where it feels like every single one of my friends and my cousins and my siblings is getting married or finding love of their life? Yep. But about 60% of them a year from now, they're going to be single, back in the same boat they were before, right?
Yeah. So true.
So just keep that in mind as you're going through all these things. Like get to the point where you are so happy and so content because you have so much self-love and care for yourself that you don't need somebody, you want somebody, right? Just like Moses when he came down off the mountain, he radiated. And I would just encourage your listeners to kind of follow that.
Yeah, that's so good. Thank you so much. Where can people find you and find out more about you?
It's a great question. So you can just check me out on Instagram, Dave C. Scott. So at Dave C. Scott. You can follow me on TikTok. It's TikTok Dave Scott. And I'll send you my info too. So anybody can follow me. If you want to check out my personal blog, it's the Rough Draft blog, all one word.com.
Okay. And then just a last thing, do you have just one encouraging word that you would give everyone listening?
Oh man. Yeah. Just know that you're lovable and important and valuable. And I love you. And you're doing great. And it's your turn to go and win the day.
That's right. I love that. Right back at you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me
Okay.
on.
Well,
Awesome.
of course, that's a wrap for today. Thank you so much for everything. I always enjoy our conversations.
You bet. Anytime.